Beginning, what was the seed of that idea, and where does Hogfather fit in the whole series of Discworld books?
Discworld began in the early 1980s, and really I suppose it was initially an antidote to fantasy. What I call the consensus fantasy universe, the one with the wizards and the witches and the trolls and the elves and the dwarves and the heroes and so forth, had been fairly well established by many authors. So I thought, now it's time to have some fun. And the best way to have fun with a fantasy universe is to take it seriously and say, how would it work? How would it work if it was actually real? That was how it began. I've written well over 30 books set on Discworld now. And around about halfway through the series, I wanted to write one about what makes us human. And what makes us human is really our imaginations. I think we're probably not actually Homo sapiens. I think we're pan-narrans. We're a chimpanzee that's good at telling stories. And one of the stories that we tell ourselves is that we are actually thinking people. But our fantasies are very, very important. For example, we have a fantasy which is called justice. It has no existence anywhere else in the universe as far as we know, but we have created the concept, and people fight and die for justice. Fantasies are important. And somehow I was thinking about this, and Hogfather arose. Hogfather had already, Hogswatch had already been created as the Discworld Midwinter Festival, which is approximately appropriate to Christmas. And Hogfather is the spirit of Hogswatch, and he looks a bit like Father Christmas, except he has tusks, and he brings you sausages and other pork products at Christmas, and has his antecedents way back, in almost prehistoric times when people would hunt the wild boar at that time of year. And he sort of metamorphosed from one shape to another until he became something like the jolly red and white man we know today.
Fantastic. So are there particular rules or principles that govern Discworld? And can you talk about how similar and how different it is to this world, to the round world?
Discworld, the universe of Discworld contains an extra element, which is narrativium. It's found associated with every other element, and it's that bit that tells it what it is. It's that bit of copper which tells it that it is copper. And because of this, stories have a big influence on Discworld. The shapes of stories have a big influence. We know this because we imagine this in our fairy stories. We just know that if the third son of a king goes off on an adventure, he's going to succeed where his two brothers failed. We just know. And if he helps an old lady out there in the forest, she will be a witch in disguise who will, give him luck. I mean, we know this. We know that James Bond is going to defuse the bomb, actually, usually these days at 007 seconds before it goes off, rather than a few seconds after it's gone off, which would be ridiculous. We think in terms of story shapes, and Discworld takes advantage of this.
That's obviously very different from Discworld, where we might wish that this happens.
Discworld, yes. Discworld is to some extent this world as we sometimes think it is or wish it would be. For example, on the whole, the good guys, or at least the least bad guys, tend to win. That's because Discworld was invented and our world was created by a large number of random processes.
I'll ask you again, what's the crucial difference between Discworld and Discworld?
The crucial difference between Discworld and what we are pleased to call the real world is that Discworld was created by me as a storyteller, using narrativium, using all the tricks of telling stories, playing tricks with your own imagination. This world kind of more or less happened. I know there are one or two people who think it was slightly different from that, but generally speaking, Discworld has an author and our world, generally speaking, does not.
Fantastic. So this is the first live-action Discworld film. Have others been in the offing and haven't happened, or did you not want to make them? And what was it about this one that made you?
Probably the biggest problem with filming Discworld is me. Discworld has made me quite a lot of money, and I haven't really got anything to prove. I'm not desperate for a movie. One would like one to happen, but it's not something I'm prepared to give up a lot for. In fact, I've bought back the rights of 2 Discworld books that I had previously sold to the cinema because no progress was being made on them. But I have to say that this one happened because Vadim and Rod came to see me, and they were very, very enthusiastic. Now, enthusiasm is a debased coinage in filmmaking because everyone is always enthusiastic, and you kind of take that as a given because they always tell you how enthusiastic they are about your book. The important thing is never to ask them a detailed question about it because they won't know. But Vadim had got it. I mean, he was hugely enthusiastic. He was bouncing off the walls, but when I read his script, or his suggested script, it worked. He had got it. And when I made suggestions, he listened to them and incorporated them. And all the way through the process, I've been waiting for something to go wrong, like they would tear off the mask and say, ha ha ha, you didn't think it was really going to happen like this. But no, it's continued all the way through. They phoned me up to get my views on casting, for example, and have listened to what I said. And it's been a gentle process. I mean, I haven't tried to force myself on them because that would be silly, and I can't take over, and they obviously are doing a very good job. But I've come along to the set several times, and even then I mentioned something to Vadim, and he said, yes, that's a good idea, we'll do that. And the next shot, they did it. I thought, great. This is like being allowed to play with the train set for 5 minutes.
Fantastic. The main themes of the Hogfather.
I think that perhaps the main theme of the Hogfather is that our fantasies make us human. Is it a good thing that children believe in the Tooth Fairy or believe in the Hogfather, or shall we say Father Christmas? Yes, because if we are anything, we are imaginative. And as I say in the book, we need to train our imagination on the little lies, the Tooth Fairy and the Hogfather, so we can believe the big lies like justice, truth, and turn them, and by taking them seriously, make them into something that is real. Without imagination, we would be just another boring kind of ape.
Can you talk about the mythology that underpins this story? And you seem to be feeding from all sorts of German,
easily,
Russian,
yeah.
Germanic traditions.
I had a pained email from my German translator who said that quite a lot of Hogfather would be difficult for him to translate because Germans did not have this particular bit, for example, as part of their mythology. What's so great about writing in the English language is that we've stolen everyone's mythologies, usually because they invaded us. Or possibly one of their princes married our queen, as happened with Prince Albert, and introduced other customs. So we've kept all our customs, more or less, and we've just borrowed everybody else's. There is quite a lot of genuine mythology behind Hogfather. The king of the bean tradition, the winter hunt. Stonehenge. I mean, we've got the kind of the midsummer tradition absolutely solidified there. So I just poured it all in, stirred it together, and chopped it up and expressed it in different ways. I have to say, I think I told the British Folklore Society that I think about folklore in the same way that a carpenter thinks about trees. You want to saw it up and see what fun, and see if you can carve it into something slightly different. There's quite a lot of, I suppose, basis in real mythology, in the background at least, to the story, and I think that's brought to the fore towards the end of Hogfather, when after his death, if you like, the Hogfather reincarnates in the various forms of the Midwinter sacrifice, and within the book, even as he's passing through the wood, there's a wren sings, which are a very mythical bird as far as the Midwinter is concerned, and a hare crosses the path. I'm told that the director can't get a wren, so I think we'll have to find some other bird. Maybe we could have an ostrich that kneels down or something. Towards the end of the film, when the Hogfather reincarnates, he goes through various incarnations of shall we say, the Midwinter sacrifice, the Midwinter deity, the tattooed man, the saint, and at last someone that we would recognise as something rather similar to our Father Christmas. And the blood on the snow becomes the white and red of his jacket. And in the book I was able to put in little mythological signifiers like the wren and the hare which crosses the path as they're walking. I understand the director can't get a wren, so I have suggested that he gets an ostrich which kneels down.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Death doesn't kill people. People kill people. Old age kills people. Disease kills people. Death turns up afterwards. And indeed, you could say he's a great friend to those in pain, for example. And one automatically thinks of him as caring about his job. And maybe it's just the way my mind works, because he spent so much time in the company of human beings, and to him we're like mayflies. We live a very short time, and we waste most of it. He can't understand us. He says at one point during Hogfather that the human race has invented one of the most rarest things that can be in the universe, which is boredom. We live in this huge universe full of vast wonders, and we get bored so very easily, and then we make up fresh things. He's simply fascinated with us. I mean, he does his job, and he will continue to do his job, but you get the feeling as in some way he's kind of on our side.
Lovely. Okay. How do you feel about seeing this world that's been inside your head for the last 20, 25 years being brought to life?
It is quite unnerving to come face to face with a character that you've created, and in fact the first one I saw was on the very first day when I met Death. I mean, figuratively speaking, and he was exactly how I imagined him in the books, and shaking his hand was an uncanny experience. And I thought, there are not many people who, while still sane, have actually met and shook hands with a figment of their imagination.
Brilliant. And you, obviously, as you've explained, this story is all about myth and fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see parallels between that story and the process of making this film?
It's fascinating for me to watch the movie emerge a bit at a time, because, as you know, it's anything but linear, and I get to see rushes, and I can more or less work out where everything goes, and it's great to see it gradually come together, and you get fresh surprises, and I have to say, many delights. One of the interesting things is that the budget for this movie has not been large, so the guys have had to make do with ingenuity, and ingenuity can do the work of money if you're ingenious. And in all kinds of little ways, they've circumvented the the lack of cash. I think if they'd got another 10 million, they would have made a bigger movie. I'm not certain whether it would be £10 million worth better. It would just be bigger.
Can you give me an example? When you visit the set, how do you feel? Is it excitement, or is it sometimes a bit kind of scary?
It's a terrible thing to admit, but when I visit the set, I think they're all working for me. I feel like, go on, well done, lads, jolly good. Yes, you'll all have a half holiday at Hogswatch. They're making a movie for me. Okay, a few million other people will see it as well, which is kind of very generous of me to allow them. But I know that's how I feel, and it's a great feeling.
Brilliant. So, will there be another one?
Will there be another one? Amicable discussions are being discussed. Beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of... Pressure's the wrong word. I think a lot of people have enjoyed themselves making Hogfather. And so it's very natural at this time to say, can we do it again? Only of course totally different. Can we pick up another Discworld book? And it would be very nice to think that this could be arranged. But I've been in the business long enough to say, yes, it's great fun, but sooner or later, some guys probably wearing ties have actually got to sit down and talk about it. But I'd love there to be another one.
Brilliant. I'm done with my questions. Is there anything else you would like to talk about? Speak up for a second.
Yeah. And you may find some of this better than some of the other stuff.
Cool.
I mean, for various reasons, I was quite suspicious for quite a long time into this process, thinking it's too good to be true, it can't possibly happen. And I think the day when it suddenly came alive for me was a month or two ago, when I went to Angels to be tried out for my costume. And I was there for about an hour, and they were really trying to get it right. And I was ever so pleased, especially with the shoes. They were the kind of shoes that Baldric out of Blackadder would have thrown away. They were absolutely marvellous. And I thought, this is really going to happen. And they're really taking it seriously, because this is a tiny, tiny little role I'm going to be in, and they're taking this one very seriously. And it really is going to happen. And they showed me the designs for the costumes, and I realised that the show was on the road. That's one. Let me think what else. Is there anything else I've mentioned to you, Rob?
I was going to mention Angels, but...
I did call it Angels, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll just say, I'll tell you, this is as much for your interest as one of the things that sort of brought a tear to my eye was the thought of the sets being broken down. And when we were here last week, they were about to break up Hex, the university's computer, and the Arch-Chancellor's bathroom, and indeed the Tooth Fairy's palace. So we hired a large truck and came down the following day and saved a number of items from the skip, which will be auctioned for charity at some future point. But it was because I just couldn't bear to see them go, and I know that there are really hardcore, keen fans out there that will go for them. As I said to Rob, supposing they just finished shooting Star Wars and someone said, there's all those model spaceships over there, shall we put them in the skip? So they're being hoarded right now. One of the things that has impressed me is that this movie has been made fast. And I don't just mean the shooting, which seems to be absolutely going along as if it's on a bullet train. But I think we started talking back in the middle of the summer last year. And here, as I speak to you, we are a few weeks away from the wrap party. Things happened incredibly quickly. And I think started with the fact that there was a big fall of snow in Scotland, and so Vadim and everyone hired a helicopter and went and did a very important scene there and then, rather than going off to Romania to shoot it. So they could move fast, and I appreciate that this is very low budget compared to the average Hollywood blockbuster. But it was so refreshing for things not to languish in the doldrums, which tends to happen a lot in the movie industry, as I'm so well aware.
Brilliant. Anything else to add?
I don't know, is there anything else you think you want me to say anyway? Do you want to?
Camera, not to me. And well, also action, you do whatever you want and just
Okay.
say happy Hogfather. So let's turn over.
So just wait for this train.
Wait for the train.
Okay.
Action.
Happy Hogswatch.